We are live, and guys, how's it going?
Well, it's great to be here. We're just watching a lot of March Madness, of course, besides all the Stony Brook action. I mean, what a heck of a tournament that's gone down already, huh, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, if your bracket's still alive, then you're a better man than I.
You're a miracle worker, if that's the case. Because it only took me 1 day for my bracket to get busted. Thank you, St. Peter's, for that.
But that's what it's all about. That's why we watch, right? That's what brings us in, and that's what gets us to watch. We feel like we know better, and the bracket and the tournament lets us know that we don't.
So where do we want to go first? Because, of course, there's still a couple of games being played right now, are there not? We have some late action in the NCAA tournament. Miami and Auburn in particular. You have 2:49 left in that one. And that's the 10th seed Miami in the process of upsetting the 2 seed Auburn, Charles Barkley's alma mater. And, of course, they never let them forget it. 70-58 the score in that one. At the half, 3rd seed Purdue leads 6th seed Texas 36-30. Early going, 9th seed TCU leads top seed Arizona 12-6, but that's very, very early. But might as well run down the finals. But, again, we'll be segueing back into Stony Brook momentarily, but those were games that, are in progress. A 4-5 matchup, which seems to be relatively rare because of all the upsets, the 12s being the 5s and the 13 being a 4, but 68-53, 5th seed Houston beat 4th seed Illinois. And Villanova took care of business. 2nd seed Wildcats beat 7th seed Ohio State 71-61. Mike Krzyzewski's career continues because the 2nd seed Duke Blue Devils beat 7th seed Michigan State 85-76, and the 11th seed Iowa State Cyclones beat Wisconsin 3rd seed 54-49, and Texas Tech took care of Notre Dame 59-53, and that's just the men. The women get just as interesting, but let's start. Where do you want to begin with this?
Got to start with some lacrosse action, I think.
Yeah, because I'll tell you something. Baseball had a very nice weekend and won 2 games in dramatic fashion. And a game, one of those aired today here on WUSB. I did that game. I also did the Syracuse game. Let's start with the women because that. And women's basketball, they ended their season WNIT facing a former coach of theirs, Beth O'Boyle, and Virginia Commonwealth, the Rams. They lost that one, and we can make all kinds of arguments, and we did when we aired the game, about whether or not the 2-week layoff that they had played a part. But a defensive-oriented coach facing another defensive-oriented coach, as Greg liked to point out, and the better defense won.
Yeah, I would say so. And I was actually really impressed with the call by Coach O'Boyle there when she decided to go into the full court press. I actually thought that was a risk on her part when she did that. But what she wound up doing, because Ken, like we were saying at that point in time during the game, the bigs for Stony Brook had 22 of their points. And essentially what she did by putting the press out is not that she was looking to turn Stony Brook over, although they did once or twice. Really what they were doing is pulling them out of their rhythm in their half-court game and forcing the guards to shoot a little more. And initially I thought that might be to Stony Brook's advantage, but the guards came up cold, and VCU wound up going on a run there in the second half.
Yeah, it was a big difference between the second quarter and third quarter. Second quarter, the Seawolves shot 50% and held the Rams to 33, and that allowed them to take a 29-27 lead to the locker room. But as you said, Coach O'Boyle, she made the shift defensively, and it actually did force a lot more turnovers, 5 to be exact. But I think a big thing as well was offensively for the Rams. They scored because they got a lot of second chances. They out-rebounded the Seawolves 9-0 offensively. And it'll help them score 4 extra points on turnovers and 6 more in second chance points. So when you get 13 of your points in that quarter, just coming off mistakes Stony Brook made or their inabilities, it was really a difference maker in that contest, Greg.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe how cold Stony Brook got in the third quarter, only scoring 8 points and then on the 11 in the fourth quarter. I mean, you're talking about that 8 points might be the lowest that they scored in a quarter all season long.
It's close with that main game. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, And the other thing that we had mentioned, Ken, early on in the broadcast was that, how would the 3-week layoff help and or hurt the women? And I actually think probably wound up hurting them. I think they lost their legs a little bit with that kind of a layoff. Yeah. What do you think?
That first quarter, they were a bit sluggish, but they started to pick it up towards the end of it. Second quarter was the best quarter of the game. But to me, I say run out of gas. That's just what it looked like. Like there was just nothing left by the time the fourth quarter came around. And defensively, they actually held the Rams without a field goal for the last 5 minutes of the game. Problem was they really couldn't convert too many of their own, and they just were geared to slower than the opposition. And it's tough to beat a team that way when you're able to stop them defensively, but the offense has nothing to show for it.
Yeah, and I also think you're looking at, let's get VCU credit as well, too, the players credit as well. I think that they were a little bit bigger, faster, stronger, maybe.
Yeah, well, the big star of the game goes to Ty Robinson. I mean, she had a heck of a performance, game high, 20 points, 8 of 19 from the floor, the 5'10 graduate did. And, she proved her worth, being named to that All-Atlantic team as one of the best guards in the country. Just her ability, I thought, to do several pull-up jumpers, get open, get her teammates open to shot the ball. She did everything great: offense, defense, passing.
Yeah, and I remember at one point in time during a game thinking to myself, wow, she really has to get going. And then we looked at the box score and she had 10 points. And it was just
it was the second quarter, yeah.
Yeah, and we were thinking to ourselves, man, what a unassuming 10 points. But then she took over really in the second half and made her mark in the second half. She had a quiet 10 points in the first half, I think. And then in the second half, she really got rolling. And that was a major difference for VCU.
No, absolutely agree. So, yeah, it puts a bow to the Stony Brook season. Great.
Yeah, and I would have to say for VCU, they could be one of the teams that has a real good opportunity of winning the WNIT.
Yeah, they played really well when they were hot. We saw in the game they were unstoppable. Because they went on runs, and even if they weren't necessarily scoring every time they had possession, they were eating a lot of the clock. They were obviously stepping up defensively. They were just playing tremendous basketball, and they face Seton Hall tomorrow evening in New Jersey, so it'll be a fun matchup there. And the winner of that one will face the winner of Drexel Bucknell, who also play tomorrow. So, it'll be fun for sure, especially seeing the rest of the bracket with teams like Boston, Quinnipiac, Columbia in round 2 as well.
Guys,
I think that's a fun little tournament there for the women. That's a nice bracket that you're looking at right there. Those are some quality teams.
Well, here's something that we've done this. We kind of did it after the regular season ended with the Albany game, losing their last 2 and losing the regular season championship, which would have gotten them an automatic WNIT bid. Very fortunately for them, it didn't matter because they got in anyway. But it's very hard. It's going to be hard for the other sports too to really evaluate the season because of the effect of that America East ban, I think, because, they could be in the NCAA right now. They may get knocked out in the first round. You don't know. But
they may got knocked out first round.
Yeah. But the whole point remains is that the chances of them making the NCAA tournament, they were dominating in the America East Conference before the bomb was dropped. And they did bounce back. They lost a tough one to Maine on February 12th. But then they won 3 in a row, and then 2 tight ones, UMass Lowell and Albany by a point. And Albany ends up winning the America East of all schools. So here we go. Okay. The Seawolves, I think on balance, it was a solid season. I mean, the graduates took care of business as best they possibly could under the circumstances that were allowed them. And where do we go from here?
I think that's a real good point, Matt, because you don't have that opportunity, right? Because you listen, they're 23-6 on the season. It's an excellent season for the women. They've
without a doubt,
a handful of wins against Power 5 conferences, which you feel really good about as well too.
And that got them in the WNIT without a doubt.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That had to be the reason why they got the at-large bid. And I think, like you were saying, not given the opportunity to play in the conference, that kind of tournament, I think that kind of gives them a little bit of an edge as well too, because you would have, should have, could have. But I think for Coach Langford, for her first season at the helm, I thought she did a great job. She had a really good team, and she did a great job with the really good teams. Listen, you could have a really good team and do a bad job with them, and things could fall apart very quickly. And that didn't occur for them. But where do you go moving forward? I mean, you're losing a lot of really good players. You're losing your three bigs.
Which that's the biggest thing, Greg, is that they need to replenish their forwards, because, as you said, your primary bigs in Boucher, Pagan, Wool, all graduates, so they're not coming back. Your next big is Narmer Reyes, who's a 4, and she's a senior, so I believe she can come back for another season if she opts to. And so, assuming she doesn't stay, your next forward is Keelis Corley, who's a sophomore. So, they need that veteranship in the bigs department. And as I said, just to find really a true center, I think, because projecting the lineup going forward, we expect, Annie Warren, who's also senior, possibly Veronica Charles as well, Gigi Gonzalez, then you got Keelis Corley and Norma Vargas Reyes, but you don't have that center that you had in Pagan and Boucher, someone who's dominant inside or clean up the glass well. And that's really something they need.
I'll tell you something. The play from their big people, I think, was basically their saving grace, because if the outside shooting wasn't there, they were always able to pound it in. By the way, between games on CBS, they ran 60 minutes, and one of the segments was a feature on Sue Bird. And we all know her long career and the fact that she's still playing, and at the age of 41, she's basically the female Tom Brady as far as women's basketball is concerned. And yes, continuing to be effective and continuing to play at a top level and no reason to stop type of thing. But that's not where I'm going. Sue Bird's game primarily revolves around the mid-range shot, not a 3, not necessarily down low, 15-footer, something like that. And 2 points is better than none. And if you're effective from that range, great. But that's the thing that we've become, and again, men and women, both sides, so infatuated with the 3. You either shoot it from the perimeter or dunk it, or not even, or don't even rely on your big players. How many teams have legitimate centers anymore? And that's NBA and in college, and WNBA and college. Okay, so you're not really playing in the low post very much, but the Seawolves had an excellent post game, and I think that really did serve them very well this year.
Yeah, and it's kind of too just history with the Seawolves, where they're really dominant. They got a great post game, and they got those true centers, true bigs. On the men's side, obviously, big factor for that NCAA tournament run was Jameel Warden, who was a true big, was an NBA level forward, center. He played a few games with Dallas in the NBA. And as I say, he's one of those guys, as well as just the past several years, how their best players, their most awarded players, especially on defense, were their centers. And Jeff O'Cheary, Mo Gee, those bigs who were really dominant. Mo Gee was a guy who was also great from 3 and in terms of rebounding, blocking inside, the post, all of that. And for the women's side, they had it even better than the men this year. As I said, you got someone in India Pagan who's like that in terms of Sue Bird and shooting, or just her ability to knock down shots in the post. And obviously, Boucher cleaning up the glass. And Vargas Reyes, who's able to do both, be a good slasher and a great rebounder as well. So, as I said, you're losing your top scorer in Pagan, your number 4 scorer in Vargas Reyes, in Wool, and who, again, was someone who's also great at the 3-point game as well, and just did a great job, I thought, decoying, where a lot of defenders would expect her to roll inside, and she's out on the corner draining threes. And you lose, that's a big part of the offense that's gone now, losing 2 of your top 5 primary scorers.
So now you're going to see, it's, first of all, as Greg said, great coaching job, but not your own players. Now you're going to have to bring your own recruits in and set your game up to the way you want it. And not necessarily, and again, we're going to go back a little bit more, especially when we talk about Villanova, and Jay Wright's teams. If you've noticed, even the teams that won national championships, they were very different one year to the next. And that's basically how Jay Wright recruited. Didn't necessarily recruit players to fit a fixed philosophy. He recruited the best players he could find and then built the philosophy around it. And we're going to see what happens here.
I think when you make the comparison for the women to Villanova, one of the things that I will say, if they're going to take the personality of their coach on, I think they're going to be very aggressive. I think they're going to play staunch defense. I think that's just going to be, that's just who she is. So the team's going to kind of rub off on that. I don't think they're going to beat themselves, but I do have a sneaky suspicion that they're not going to be this big ever again. I have a feeling that she is going to go a little smaller and try to run the court a little more. And I don't have any inside information on that. I don't have any she told me kind of stuff. It just watching the team play and the way they go. Sometimes I felt like they were a race car that was trying to get going, but had a couple bigs that they had to carry up the court sometimes. So I think they might go in that direction. And certainly if you can't, Matt, like you were saying, if you can't get a couple of the bigs, then I think that's the way you have to play. Right. And,
low post players have become, first of all, I mean, when we were kids, okay, Greg, you and me, every team had a big center. That was the philosophy of basketball as a general rule, let alone the NBA. College, too. And in many cases, you have two big centers and you use all 10 fouls. So that was a Louis Carnesecca philosophy. Does anybody remember Marco Baldi? That's basically all he was there for, is to use up all his five fouls. And guys like Jeff Allen, even Bill Wennington, who had a nice long career in the NBA. I mean, he wasn't necessarily a fundamental center. He was a guy who banged around down low, and the backcourt, Jordan and Pippen were the ones doing all the scoring. But the philosophy in basketball has gone away from that, okay? You go away from a Patrick Ewing-led New York Knicks team where he was the big man and the big man, the man overall, to a very guard-oriented game. And funny enough, I think that the WNBA had a lot of influence on that, because the women prove that you can have a very effective basketball team without having a bunch of big people around. You don't need 7-footers to win.
Well, I think if you have good enough guards, you can run the other team's forwards and centers off the court. And it's going to force you to adjust. So it's that pace of play, whoever wins the pace of play. So if you're going to slow the game down and play like half court sets with a big, then you're slowing the pace of the play down. But if you have, 4 good guards that can get up and down the court, you might actually run the center off of the other team and force the other team to play with some guards, Ken.
Yeah, and just how it's looking like now, just to wrap the conversation, is, you expect Annie Warren, Earlette Scott, and Gigi Gonzalez. They're the top trio of guards, who are the other 3 top scorers at 2, 3, and 5, respectively, for the Seawolves team last year. And all of them averaged above 9 points and up. Warren and Scott averaged 12 and 10. So, we expect those numbers to go up, especially with Pagan and Wolves' departures, and just with how much they were utilized during the regular season. I definitely anticipate those 3 names being at the top of the scoring chart come next season.
And I think Turles is a really good point there, Ken, because she really came on the second half of this year. So I think she's really going to have a substantial role on next year's team, even as much as she played a number of minutes on Friday night as well, too, for 14. The women. Yeah. So, and she played a nice little game. I like the way that she plays. She pushes the ball well. She's got good command of the offense, and she's got a nice dribble. She keeps it at the same pace when she's dribbling. She never gets flustered. You never see her lose control of the handle. She is a nice game.
Okay. So, Sweet 16 time. And time for an update, because some of these games are in the books, but some are still in progress. And the way things are looking right now, you got 3rd seed Purdue leading 6th seed Texas 65-60. Let me just regenerate that to make sure that is truly up to date. And, okay, 4:10 left in the second. Purdue 65. Texas, that's 65-58. 18-19 left in the second, just out of halftime. And Arizona and 9th seed TCU, 1-point game, 41-40. Houston beat Illinois 68-53. Villanova beat OSU. Ohio State, of course, 71-61. Duke beat Michigan State 85-76. That means Coach K is still coaching. And Iowa State upset Wisconsin, the 11th seed, knocked off the 3, 54-49. Notre Dame's Cinderella run is over, lost to Texas Tech 59-53. And Miami knocked off Auburn, big upset there, and by a big score, 79-61. Number 2, Auburn Tigers are gone.
Wow. The unpredictability, man, it's something else. Just especially the 2 seeds, and you know how many fell. That we were talking about earlier with St. Peter's, the 10th number 15 seed to knock off a number 2, that being Kentucky back on the first day of the tournament.
Yeah,
go
ahead.
I think that when you're looking at these, these low. Mid-major programs or teams that shouldn't be winning. It's the fact that they've got graduate students on their team. It's the fact that they've got somebody who's a senior that's really been in college for 5 years, who's potentially playing for them. It just strengthens the type of team that they have and their belief in what they can do. The other thing it does, what COVID has done as well too for some of the players and getting that extra year is that little bit of maturity that comes along with growing older. And that recognition that it's not going to last forever. Youth is wasted on the youth. And when you get a little bit older, you recognize that. So when you're 22, you recognize that more than when you're 20 years old. I think you're seeing that play a role right now in the tournament. I certainly have you guys watched Iowa State play?
Oh, yeah, they're another one that just played absolutely tremendously. They're the 11th seed, and they just earlier today upset number 3 Wisconsin. This is a team just last season won 2 games in its entirety.
You know what that tells you, though? That tells you how quickly you can turn a program around, because mention Beth O'Boyle and the Stony Brook Seawolves way back 10 years ago when she took over the program. Her first season was 4-24. By the time she left, it was 24-9. That got her the VCU job. But the most important thing there is that, yes, because of the turnover of players, you can turn a program around fast.
Yeah.
And the transfer portal helps too.
Yes. Big deal. But I think with Iowa State, I watched them play. They can beat Miami. There's not even a question about it. They do.
Really, to me, the guy that stands out is, let me just double check here to be sure. Yeah. Is Isaiah Brockington. I mean, he is just absolutely incredible. He was a huge dominant scorer for them. 6'4" guy, transfer from Minnesota, and he went 10 for 19 that game. And the rest of the team only made 10 field goals. And you're talking about that veteranship. He's a senior, and he's a guy who I think can really, take them far. He's rating them far just with how good he played against Wisconsin and LSU.
Yeah, I tell you what, I just think that they're excited. It's exciting. It's exciting. It's part of that excitement. I think he is an excellent player as well too. Does he have enough in him to continue to go? I think this is where it becomes the strain of the tournament, right? Where you're playing back to back. You play your conference tournament. You have to win to get in. Then you play in every game is a win to get in situation, and it's such a rush situation, right? You're playing Thursday, you play Thursday, Saturday, Friday, Sunday, and then you go back and you do it again. It's such an interesting tournament in that regard. Can he continue to do that as well too and carry a team? And
yeah, he's a great help too. And Gabe Kalsher, who was he's the one that actually went 10 for 19 that game against Wisconsin, and the rest of the team combined for 10. But he's another guy who really stepped it up for them. And that duel, I thought, is really one of the more impressive duels, I think, in the tournament as a whole.
Yeah, I think they're one of those teams we've been talking about, the Stony Brook versus Syracuse team, and you were thinking to yourself how much more athletic Syracuse was going to be, and they really weren't. I think you feel the same way about Iowa State. You probably thought Iowa State wasn't going to be that athletic, and they really are. They
no
can
way.
play. They can play.
Yeah,
They're
they
fun to
hustle.
watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really do. So that's a fun team right there when you look at them. Kansas, Providence, Villanova does what Villanova does. They don't beat themselves. They hit their foul shots. They play within themselves. They're well coached. Them against Michigan, I'm surprised. I didn't think Michigan was going to get past Tennessee.
Me neither. No, me neither.
Yeah, well, that controversy surrounding Juwan Howard, and then now everybody loves him because, he consoled an opposing player. You got that great picture. But look, it just shows you how fickle even the sports media can be when it comes to Juwan Howard. I think, first of all, he's done a great job at Michigan. There's no doubt about that. And, maybe not getting a lot of love, but on the other hand, the Big Ten got plenty of love, so we really can't complain.
Yeah.
But 11 taking on a 3 and dumping them, Tennessee. But now they got Villanova, and as you said, Greg, Villanova doesn't make mistakes. And the important thing, too, and I think Jay Wright mentioned it during the Big East tournament, and I was fortunate enough to be there when he said it, is that unlike a lot of top programs, Villanova keeps its players longer than most. Calipari, as we said, the $1 billion in NBA contracts is how he gauges his success. Well, the fact of the matter is that does not translate into deep tournament runs because these guys don't stick around long enough. They don't play together long enough. That's not the case with Villanova.
Yeah, he's got really an interesting system going on in doing so. I wonder if it is his CAA days and his Hofstra days that's kind of like joined him. It just seems like, I heard this one time like years ago, and I think it's so true. You don't get what you want in life; you get what you are in life, right? And when I really think that holds true when you're coaching. Like I watched a thing on Jay Wright a couple of years ago, and they talked about he really is a family guy. Right. He really, and he just brings his players in. He treats them like they're his children. He really, really does it. You can't fake what he's got cooking there. And I think that you attract guys that want to be around this family type atmosphere. And when you have that, that's the group that fights for each other. They're really overachievers in a lot of ways. They're not more athletic than other teams. They're good. They're quality college basketball players, but you don't look at them saying to yourself, "Well, these guys are definitely going into the NBA."
Well, our own Jeff Bernstein knew Jay Wright from his Hofstra days and was working his camps there, and still years after continued to work Jay Wright's summer camps at Nova. How do you like that? And part of the family.
Yeah.
So
and I know people that were at Hofstra when he was there. They're playing on other sports, so they would see him on a regular basis. And they just said he was the nicest guy. Like he would just say, "Hey guys, how's it going?
I'll tell you today.
What's going on?"
I'll tell you something else. Another guy's like that when he was at Stony Brook, Steve Peichel. No doubt about it. Very much the same. Always said hi. Okay, when I was in Omaha, he'd seek me out. It was, and he was. He would be there for everything. If he wasn't directly involved with his own program during the off season or something like that, he'd be at the events and always there for us too. He always was there with the post game interview. He would do the other media, but he'd always be there for us at the end of the game, and was on the sports section every single week. Loved to promote his program, loved to talk about it, and he was the type of guy, very similar to Jay Wright in a lot of ways in terms of their impact on the athletic department as a general rule and the basketball program in particular, because he really did change the culture. Because the expectations after he left, after finally breaking through the glass ceiling and winning the America East, they've remained high. Bowles and Ford have seen it, and yes, have they necessarily gotten to the same heights? No, but they've definitely garnered the same level of attention, and that's because Steve Peichel revolutionized it. But there's another thing that Peichel gave us, and there was Stony Brooking as a verb, and Stony Brooking is basically the opponent selling you short because you're Stony Brook. And I first heard it used by Matt Larson back in 2010 when we were down in Myrtle Beach. And we were playing in baseball. We were playing NC State. We had lost to Coastal Carolina in the opener in the loser bracket. NC State trying to save their pitching because they think they're going to beat us. They run their bullpen out there, and we beat them. And Larson said, they tried to Stony Brook us. And we won. Now, of course, we ran out of pitching, got walloped by Coastal Carolina the next day. But that was after that loss, rip your heart out, devastating loss. That was when Matt Sank got on the bus and said, this team's capable of getting to a super regional. And 2 years later, we were in Omaha. But in any case, the whole point was that term Stony Brooking was coined by Peichel. Because it was the whole thing, because Stony Brook had an inferiority complex. To a degree, I believe it still does. But Peichel tried very hard to get rid of it. And so did Jim Fiore to an extent, but I think it was mostly Peichel.
And I think that's why you catch yourself rooting for him still, even though he's at Rutgers. He was just that kind of a guy, and you're watching him coach at Rutgers, and he's doing the same things at Rutgers as he was doing at Stony Brook, and he's not denying that that's what he's doing, right? This is who he is. This is what he does. And really, Rutgers was a doormat for college basketball for a long time as well, too. That was
They were the weak sister of the Big East. They were the weak sister of the Big Ten. They were the weak sister of the A-10. I mean, they bounced around. They kind of like Fordham, okay? But it also, and Fordham's been looking for that magic too, and basically they have not found it. Yes, they're getting a little bit better, but not to the same level of turnaround that Rutgers has experienced because they didn't hire Steve Peichel. And that does have a lot to do with it, getting the right guy. I mean, if Fordham had hired Jay Wright, now, of course, the counter argument among the Fordham alumni, many friends of mine, would say Fordham would not have appreciated Jay Wright and run him out in 5 years. But Jay Wright was basically... Yeah, first of all, he started out at Villanova as an assistant under Raleigh Massimino, got his head coaching chops at Hofstra, developed those, and then came back to Villanova when the time came. And he's been there ever since, and he's led them to unprecedented success. But so he was always going to be at Villanova. But when you come to a guy of that character and a guy who can change the culture on his character alone, you're looking for a Peichel. You're looking for a Jay Wright.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think he really is the next. And when you watch Rutgers play and when you watch Stony Brook play, they play hard. They play good defense. They don't make mistakes. They don't beat themselves. They're enjoyable to watch.
Hey, we've Stony Brook. Look, we hit those America East finals. And yes, it was kind of like almost an on-the-job training for Steve Peichel as well, because we would, they'd forget how to shoot threes. There'd be some aspect of their game that would be missing. And finally, I think Jameel Warney, more than anybody, got the message, because in 2016, 6 years ago, Stony was going to happen again. Stony Brook was dead in the water against Vermont and said, here we go again, off to the NIT. Jameel Warney said, no. I will carry this team to the NCAA if it kills me. Over 43, I believe it was on the afternoon, and he did. Carry the team on his back to victory.
Now, Ken, a couple really exciting games now that go back to the NCAA tournament. North Carolina, UCLA, what do you think?
Oof, that's just so tough. UCLA, obviously, just so much history there as a program. They got the most national titles out of everyone. I think just how hot UNC has been all season. They really haven't looked weak to me at many, if any point this season. It's tough to root against them right now. My bracket does have UCLA putting up the upset. I don't know why. It's just how it is.
You know what? I think that win UNC over Duke in Cameron Indoor Stadium on the last night for Mike Krzyzewski has really made this team believe. So I can really see UNC winning that. We go to the, St. Peter's is waiting for Texas, and and Purdue to finish. Right now, I got 52-52 Arizona and TCU, but there's still 14 minutes left in the game, so plenty of time there. Kansas and Providence, I think that's Kansas, right? That matchup right there, I think Kansas is just too good. I think Providence is having a nice run, but I think Kansas is too good.
Hey, we saw Kansas early in the season. Providence, I mean, they got to a point in the Big East tournament. We're not going to win it. Let's go get set for the tournament, for the NCAA. Providence can fool you, though. Providence, they're capable of it. I mean, yes, I think Kansas will eventually prevail, but I think it's going to be close.
If Arizona does hold off and beat TCU, which is what you expect to happen, Arizona, Houston's playing really well right now.
They're playing tremendous basketball. I remember 5 seed as well. And I know they had a strong outing back on their first round matchup on Friday. And yeah, the Cougars are a team where they're really good, really from 3-point range. They shot 47% in the win against the Dragons, and they're really good at cleaning up the glass. So if they remain consistent doing both of those things, I can see them going pretty far.
Well, if that's the case, now again, University of Houston, of course, is the member Phi Slamma Jamma, again, Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler, who, of course, both Hall of Famers, going up against Patrick Ewing and Georgetown, 84, and then going to the national championship game twice and losing, one to NC State and one to Georgetown. And then, of course, getting revenge 10 years later in the NBA Finals, but that's another story. It's been a while since Houston was this deep in a tournament. And
being Illinois helped put them up there today, yeah.
I mean, I'm going to check because I don't think they've been this deep since those days.
Yeah, and I think they got it going a little bit. I was watching the end of the game there today, and they were like celebrating the. I don't know if you guys saw this, but they were celebrating in the locker room, and they like show like pictures of guys who are like celebrating and stuff. And the coach takes off his shirt and he's like dancing around with the players as well too. And they're going crazy for him as well. So they've got something special going on as well. But I guess everybody's got to feel like right now that they've got something going on special, right? They're in the Sweet 16. They've got something that's special. When I look at the
correction, Houston went deep last year. Okay, that 2021, the one where I don't think anybody was even allowed in the building, but yeah, they went 28-4 under Kelvin Sampson, and TBD obviously, but they did win the American Conference Championship, and they went to let's see, that was that they got to the Final Four, I believe, didn't they? But go on.
So if you look into the West bracket and you look at Gonzaga is playing Arkansas, and you really feel like Gonzaga, was the favorite, obviously, in that game. They have the overall number 1 seed. They brought up an example today because they were saying who's going to be the next Mike Krzyzewski. And I thought Mark Few would be the next one. He's a guy, Duke was terrible when Krzyzewski took him over, right? And for a couple of years there, they didn't think Krzyzewski was going to last. Mark Few has built that Gonzaga program up, and the only thing he has left to do is to win a national championship, right? And when you bring up Gonzaga now, you're talking NCAA basketball, you're talking number 1 seed.
Yeah,
right?
consistently at that, right? That's been the biggest difference since he's gotten there, is that they're just consistently year in, year out the past few years. They're a number 1 seed, and they're not a team that gets upset lightly. They are consistently dominant. They have long runs, and as you said, if there's really a guy who could definitely fit that bill, he's going to need the championship first and then a few more after that. But yeah, still in the hunt for his first.
Yeah, but I think it was the idea that you built something.
Right.
And you built something that now is there to last. Right. And I think he's got it going right there. That'd be an interesting one right there. Do you think St. Peter's has got enough to keep it going?
They're the Cinderella team, man. So this team you just don't want to count out because, they've been rolling since the end of their regular season, right? And they've been overcoming the odds since then. It's, as I said, this Gonzaga team, they're a team that they're not an easy out, obviously. So like they're consistently among the top rankings. And I think Cinderella's story ends sadly because the last time they didn't make it past fourth round was back in 2019-2020 when they lost to BYU, but or rather that was tournament play. But just going back to just March Madness, they're a team where consistently they're in Sweet 16 so far Sweet 16. National Championship last year, lost to Baylor. Elite 8, Sweet 16, National Championship, Sweet 16, Elite 8. They haven't been knocked out in Sweet 16 since 2014. So, as I said, I don't see the run stopping now. They're a team that's looking to get that national championship that they thought they had last year.
Yeah, I mean, and they have the Timmy returning, and he's got to be looking for one, right?
He's going to be a top draft pick for sure. He's not one. He's definitely going to be up there. He's just so dominant. I think he's a guy who he looks like the big kid, and everyone else is trying to play at that level. That's how good he is.
So as I'm looking through the scores here, it looks like Purdue is actually just taking down Texas. They win by 10. So it'll be St. Peter's versus Purdue. And I think that will be a really interesting matchup for the tournament as well, too. I think that's going to be a style of play. Whoever gets their style of play going is going to win that game.
I think Purdue's been really dominant, especially today, getting to the free throw line. They had 33 free throws in today's contest. They have 46 attempts, made 33 of them. More free throws made than field goals made. 21 field goals, 33 free throws. So they're a team where they got a lot of bigs. They crash the glass and dominate. 32 defensive rebounds. They don't give up 6 chances. So our St. Peter's, they got to knock it down on their first offensive possession each time because they're not going to get many second chances.
Yeah, and, if Purdue's game plan is to get you in foul trouble and get St. Peter's bench into the game, that would probably be how I would attack it as the coach. Is I would look to be very aggressive on the offensive end, try to get your players in foul trouble, and then get your backups on because your bench isn't going to be as deep as Purdue's bench. Let's be honest. If you're St. Peter's, they're
going to be a tough matchup Sunday for UNC or UCLA, whichever team wins tomorrow, because as I said, this Purdue team has been on fire as of late, and they're just so good at getting to the line. That's tough team to beat.
Yeah. Now that we're looking at the 16 of them, this is going to be a nice Sweet 16 here. I don't really think that there's too many teams. I don't know. I think that any one of the teams could win in the 16 now. I think the least likely to would be St. Peter's because of everything that they've done so far. But every other team you're looking at, you say to yourself, I could see them, I could see Arkansas beating Gonzaga, even though I expected Gonzaga. I have Gonzaga winning the whole thing in my bracket. I could see Texas Tech beating Duke, right? UNC North Carolina is a coin toss for me. Right. So, and like Matt, you were saying, Providence over Kansas, that could happen.
Judging from what they've been able to do all season, yes, you can't rule them out. I like the depth of their talent. And, Kansas, of course, they showed Stony Brook something early in the season, but I don't necessarily think they're the overwhelming power they have been in past years.
Yeah, the name is carrying more weight than the players are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But I think that's the case, too, is that in this tournament and in recent years, there aren't too many. Not even Duke, for example. I mean, a 2 seed. Villanova, yes, of course they did, win the Big East again, and but nobody really overwhelms. Nobody has a clear path, I think, to a national championship, particularly with the upsets that we've had. I mean, North Carolina, yes, beating Duke, as you said, at Cameron Indoor Stadium in the final game of Krzyzewski's final game there, made them into North Carolina again. You know what I mean? Because they had been struggling. They're mid-pack in the ACC all year. And people thought this was going to be an off year. But all of a sudden, they're alive again, and they're dangerous again, and UCLA may have their work cut out.
Oh, absolutely. They got their work cut out for sure. And the UCLA is a higher seed. They're 4 to UNC's 8. But this 8 seed UNC is not an 8 seed. You know what I mean? Like, this would be an even level matchup for both teams.
However, St. Peter's first of all, mid majors and alumni of mid majors and fans of mid majors are all, of course, rooting for the underdogs and the Loyolas and the St. Peter's and all the other big upset schools, even Vermont, believe it or not. But in any case, the thing that really turns us on is that the gaps have been narrowing for years, and it's been happening for the past 20 years or so. It really, and maybe a little less than 20. Obviously, the first obvious case was when George Mason went to the Final Four out of the CAA. Okay. The thing that bothers me is I think the selection committee is a little bit behind the times, giving 9 bids to the Big Ten, leaving 3 at-larges that should have gone to the A-10, only sending 2. Okay. The record is bearing out. The upsets, the mid-majors going deep, are telling you that the game of college basketball is changing. And it's no longer about the same 5 teams in the Final Four, in alternating years. It's changing because the talent gap is narrowing. It's kind of what happened in football when they shortened the rosters in FBS football. The Boise States of the world are finally saying, "Hi, we deserve a shot at the national championship." They go to a playoff, which they threw a bone because no mid-major's going to the playoff. The only way a mid-major wins anything is if they're an FCS and they make a deep run. But in the NCAA basketball tournament, a 15 can win it all. A 16 can win it all. Mm-hmm. But we've been seeing more and more of those double-digit seeds going deep. Winning first-round games, winning second-round games, advancing to the Sweet 16. You can't ignore them anymore. And yet, for some strange reason, the selection committee continues to do so.
There's a great quote by Dean Smith from years ago, obviously. And he was talking about the NCAA tournament just as an example. And he's like, listen, it's the NCAA tournament. It's not the NBA playoffs. I don't have to win 18 holes. I just have to win 1. Right? And that's really what the NCAA tournament's all about. I don't have to be better than you 18 times. I don't have to beat you 4 out of 3 times. 4 out of 7. I just have to beat you once. Right. And I just have to, and then every good night. And Matt, when you see somebody do it, or you see a team do it, and then you're on a mid-major team, well, why can't we do it? St. Peter's just did it.
Exactly.
Well, why can't I do it? Loyola Chicago.
Stony Brook, the guys in the locker room are saying, "Hey, we beat those guys."
Right. Why can't we do it?
Yeah.
Right? So the more and more that occurs, you're right. Umbc just did it. Right?
Yeah,
they
knocking over, and then Virginia wins it the following year. Talking about a bounce back.
Right. So you just kind of say to yourself, like, if they can knock them off, well, why can't we knock them off? Right. I'm not looking to win 18 holes. Just 1. That's all I have to do. Right. And what a different perspective when you think about it that way. And that's why the NCAA tournament is so good, because you don't have to win one of these series, because I think it's just too difficult to win a 7-game series, right? You only have to win a 1-game series. And I think that makes it fun.
Oh, absolutely. Just the atmosphere about it too. It's nothing like the college atmosphere. And they're in different regions as well, but you still see fans coming out and supporting, just being loud and raucous. It's just a great time, I think. Just great experience, watching and listening to these games.
Okay, we got a caller.
Awesome.
Hi, guys.
Yeah.
Jay from Centereach. Go ahead.
No, I was just listening to you talking about the tournament, and I think you made some good points. And even though I'm sort of a Big Ten fan, and I was happy for Coach Peichel and happy for Indiana that I went to graduate school to get in, you can't have 9 teams in and then only get, whatever they get, 2 into the Sweet 16. I mean, they ought to. I think if I was in charge, I would make a rule sort of like what they have for bowl games, that in bowl games you have to have at least a 500 record to be eligible for a bowl game. So I would say that if you don't have a 500 record in your conference, you can't go to the NCAA unless you win your conference tournament. So then you don't have all these.
In most cases, that they do that.
But if 2/3 of the Big Ten got in. Obviously, there's some teams there that had less than 500 records in their conference. So.
But the in conference, yes, but overall they're all over. But that's always the case. And even the Big East and all the power conferences, even the America East, they're good. Some teams with sub 500 records were overall better because they had good non-conference records. But the whole point here is not so much that. Are there 9 good teams in the Big Ten? Sure. The only problem is there are teams in other conferences that are probably better who got snubbed.
Well, that's my point. You got to let some of these other teams in. Indiana just had all they could do to beat Wyoming. Rutgers. That game with Notre Dame could have gone either way. But there's all kinds of teams like that. Greg was talking a minute ago about when UMBC beat Virginia. They did it with a player who used to play for Virginia. I mean, that's getting to the point you made about the talent being, leveling out. And we've seen that, too, where a lot of people from the America East have gone on to play at mid-major schools and, been at least rotation players, maybe not stars, but, I can't remember where it was. Sam Sessoms, who killed us when he was at Binghamton, was playing somewhere this year on national TV. I remember, my head jerked up when I heard his name called. And the year after Villanova won the title, there was a guy from Albany who used to kill us. He went to Villanova as a graduate transfer and was in their rotation. And there's other examples that are out there.
Jay, I have a question. I think that's an interesting thing where you have to be above 500 in the conference. That's a really one. You'd have to look back, right, and do almost like and mathematically look back at the stats of other teams and what they've done. I've always felt, though, you should have more than 20 wins to make the tournament unless you win your conference tournament and to get in, right? Like 20 wins should be, for me, the barometer to get in. What do you think about that?
It's probably too low a bar because I think all these teams that probably have 20 wins. I think, especially when your non-conference schedule is made up of mostly teams not as good as you, when you're from a bigger conference.
But it works for Michigan right now with that argument because Michigan's 19-14, and that includes the NCAA tournament, right? So, I think if you're one of those, Power 5 teams, I think you have to have 20 wins. I'm just trying to think of other things that you could do. I do like the 500 record in the conference. I think that's interesting. To do
then
that.
You're relative, you're relative to your peers. So you're not, even if you're, whatever the ninth best team in the big. That means there's 8 teams in your own conference that are better than you. So whatever, And you think about it when you get to whatever we have, like 34, I think it is at-large bids. That 1/4 of them are going to the Big Ten. There's something wrong with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. That really is. So I do think you're right, and I think basically we're all kind of agreeing here. I think the mid majors are starting to have a huge impact on the tournament, and rightfully, you have to admit that that's going on, and therefore, in years coming up, more mid majors should get in. I think you're probably looking at a situation where you have to start to consider a team from a mid major that runs the table, but then loses in the in the conference championship, and then you wind up getting a team from the conference that is have an average season. You'd start taking that team as well too.
Yeah, I mean they were talking to the head of the selection committee last weekend, and they referred to those teams as bid stealers, as if like they don't deserve to be there. Which is kind of not fair.
Well, they didn't exactly steal them. The selection committee stole them for them. I mean, that's where the selection committee. I don't understand what the operating philosophy is here.
Yeah.
Is it to get? That's the other thing. The NCAA tournament pie. Okay, that very big pie. It's like one of those Guinness World Record pies because it is huge, and that's one of the reasons why so many schools 20 years ago in particular, Stony Brook included, upgraded their athletic programs to get a piece of that pie. because getting into the NCAA gives you a pile of money. Going deeper into the NCAA gets you a bigger pile of money. And that's why the mid-majors really started to take their programs a lot more seriously. And that's why we have that is a contributing factor. And you know what, guys? You could do a PhD thesis on this. I bet people have, on the effect of that big NCAA tournament pie has had on athletics across the board. I mean, you still have some schools that dig their heels and saying, we're staying in D3 because we don't need the money, we have big endowments, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? The Ivy League champion gets a piece of the NCAA tournament pie. So they take it seriously, even though they got plenty of money. But then you have the UAA, where you have NYU, University of Chicago, Washington University, St. Louis. Oh, yeah, we're proud to be in D3. Yeah, right, whatever. Nobody cares about them anymore. But the point still remains that Stony Brook definitely upgraded to D1 for two reasons. Number one, they're a big state school. They couldn't find anybody to play them. And number two, they wanted a piece.
Yeah, I think, and JD, to your point too, I look at the first four, and we spoke about it last week, I think briefly. I look at the first four in the NCAA tournament here, so it's like the 60, 68. I always kind of looked at that and said, why don't you instead of putting a Power 5 team in there and playing in those, why don't you make those 8 teams be these mid-major teams and see, let them get a game in and then go to the from the out bracket into the tournament bracket. I'd rather that be, teams, 68, 67, 66, 65, down to 60 to 68, and have those be the teams that play in that section instead of adding the big Power 5 conferences in.
The year that Stony Brook got in, I think me and a lot of other people were actually hoping we got a play-in game so we'd get a chance to get our feet wet before we had to take on Kentucky.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because you realize, okay, it really is just playing basketball. We're just doing it in a bigger arena. Yeah,
because if you look at what happened even last year with the women, it was great that they got in. They were all excited, but that game was over in the first 10 minutes,
Yeah.
And, hey, just a shout-out.
Unfortunately, Jay, I think there's still a big divide between the Power 5 conferences in women's basketball. That divide is still there, or is larger in women's basketball than it is in men's basketball.
It's getting narrower, but compared to 20 years ago when Stony Brook first entered, it was huge. The Power 5, that's where the best basketball was being played, and there was a big drop off after that. But it has gotten narrower, has gotten better.
Yeah, I think it's probably it's going to lag, like in many things, like it'll lag the men's game, but as more, young women play basketball and there's more good players, it'll over time that'll narrow too, as we're seeing in the men's game now, I think. I just wanted to give a shout out to Vermont for not only the game they played. I didn't get the call in. It was only last weekend, I guess, but the way they destroyed UMBC, that was a very impressive game, and then giving Arkansas a good run there, so they deserve that. A good shout-out for them, though.
Well, it was Vermont's year. I think we all kind of acknowledge that. Naturally, as fans of the Seawolves, we were hoping that if I still do believe, and I think everybody will agree with me, that if the bomb hadn't been dropped, Stony Brook would have given Vermont a better run for their money, but Vermont was running away with the conference. And, it's no surprise that they end up winning it. And, you have to give them the respect they deserve for doing so. Of course, we don't have to deal with them anymore. But we're going to deal with another can of worms in a much tougher conference, CAA, next year.
Mm-hmm. I actually, looking at my bracket, I almost picked Vermont to upset Arkansas there. It
was possible.
Watching and
they've done it before. They knocked off Syracuse in the 13.
Yeah, but watching them play this year, they were so good. They could shoot it. They could get on the inside. They really didn't have any weaknesses. And based on the score, 75-71. So that was a really good game. So it was one of those. I just couldn't write Vermont on my bracket. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, we're all still reeling over the whole America East thing, and I still believe that I find it ironic that Stony Brook players still win Player of the Week awards in the America East Conference. It's like, look, we can't compete in the tournament. We're essentially dead to you as it is. Why do you bother?
Well, I think that's the one thing we talked about in the past about not taking it out on the players so much as the schools. So this is maybe one way to not take it out on the players.
Yeah, Jay, I think I'm 100%. Like after I thought about it for a while, I said to myself, you know what? The players deserve the recognition of being all conference or first team or second team or player of the week. So if they've earned it, then it's important to them. It's special for them because they get to walk away and say that they were an all conference player. And then that's a big deal.
Yeah. I think when you were talking earlier about the women's basketball team, hey, first of all, nice that two America East schools got into the women's NIT this year. Not
yes.
Not just Stony Brook, but also, that's probably a record, which may not, that they actually took that three teams made the postseason from the America East. But the coach of the women's basketball team, she got named to. I hope she's around for a little while, but she got named to some list of black women mid-major coaches to watch, and there was only 12 people on the list. So other people are noticing her too.
Yeah, that raised my eyebrow as well too. Thinking about that as well, like hope she is going to be around. I do think she is because of what we spoke about earlier in the show, and that was the idea about what is she going to do with her players. So I think as a head coach, she's got to prove that she can bring in some recruiting classes and then mold them into the team that she wants them to be.
Well, Another thing, I think with Steve Peichel, we thought that when he finally breaks through the glass ceiling, he's going to get picked up by somebody, but not before. And as it turns out, minutes after he wins the championship for the America East in 2016, he gets a job at Rutgers. But I don't think that happens unless he wins. I don't think he gets that job offer unless he wins that championship. I think that the Power 5 schools were looking at him, I think, over the years, but nobody was willing to pull the trigger until he broke through because they didn't want a guy who hasn't won anything. Okay, you can justify it to the alumni and the fans and the students saying, okay, this guy's hot. This guy just won the America East. This guy's going to turn around for us. As it turns out, he did.
Yeah, and he just got an extension, too, this past week. So credit to him for that. Yes, he did.
Deservedly so.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
And even the same thing, Matt, what you were just saying, the same thing happened with the women's coach last year. She gets into the tournament, and then another school hired her away. It happened at Hofstra a few years back, too, when their women's team made the tournament.
Well, that is just the way things are as a mid-major. Yeah. I mean, you expect first of all, this is not a place people go to retire, number one. Number two, this is a place where you are looking for, as an athletic director, a young, up-and-coming coach. You're not going to get, look, Jim Calhoun came out of retirement to coach. He's coaching some team whose name I forget, actually, but he is coaching.
I think it's a Division III school, actually.
A Division III school. Rick Pitino came back to coach. He's at Iona, so he's just basically going back to his roots. And, so because they can't, it's in their blood, they don't have anything better to do. But do I think Mike Krzyzewski's going to come out of retirement? I don't know. But do I necessarily think that Stony Brook will be making a move for him if he does?
Well, I think the thing about Calhoun and Pitino is that they both kind of had to leave under not the best of circumstances. So.
Also true. I mean, Krzyzewski's
they're kind of looking to
the squeakiest of squeaky clean records, but the fact remains is that he's retiring on his own terms. Unless you take a look at the AT&T commercial, you can't get a job there. But
I saw that today. It was a pretty funny commercial, actually.
Yeah, that's smart. It's smart.
I'm only available week to week. And what game was I watching? That Larry Brown is Memphis. He's an assistant coach at Memphis. Larry Brown. He's like,
Yeah, he doesn't
Well-
have to deal with the pressures of being the head coach.
Mhm.
I
There's
mean, these
room-
guys do that. I mean, in their semi-retirement years, they don't want the heat of being the head coach, so they just hang around as an assistant.
I thought there was rumors that he was going to be like the East Hampton high school coach at one point in time.
That would
There
not
probably
surprise me.
were.
I mean,
that-
you can
that was
afford to buy a place out there. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
Guys, it is 11:59. So, Jay from Centereach, many thanks for calling, and please continue to listen.